Every art form is good at different things. Prose lets you get inside a character's head in a way that no other form of art does. Live-action acting allows for incredibly granular levels of subtlety and performance that nothing else can really match, but animation captures movement better than anything else, while comics let you tell a visual story in precisely delineated beats that the audience can move through at any speed they want. But when it comes to hacking directly into the human brain and making it feel feelings, there's no art form that does it better than music. Now, I've been singing and playing instruments for about as long as I've been talking, but I've never been able to wrap my head around composing music. I've tried, and it's really goddamn hard. As far as I'm concerned, people who can do that are basically witches. But there's no denying that music gets in your head and stays there. We memorize music better than basically anything else, to the point where it's a known life hack to turn something you're trying to remember into a goofy little jingle to keep it stuck in your head. Fun fact, that's the only reason I passed my high school geography classes. Thanks, Mom. The power of music when it comes to storytelling is a very well understood factor. Theatrical performances all throughout history and all around the world have frequently had musical accompaniment to bolster the impact of the events on stage and guide the audience's emotional response. And that's not even covering theater that was 100% musical like opera. Movies have had soundtracks for longer than they've had dialogue. Silent films were accompanied by live performers synced up to the events on screen, playing along with whatever was going on. Background music of this type adds an emotional texture to whatever's happening. We're probably all familiar with the fact that if you recut the same footage with different music, it implies wildly different narratives. A dude sprinting full speed scored with triumphant romantic music suggests that this might be a mad dash to the arms of his one true love, but if we kick off the horror strings, we'll probably assume he's being chased, and tense action music might indicate he's in a hurry to defuse a bomb or something. Music adds context, shapes narrative, and cues the audience into how exactly they should be feeling about what they're seeing. Now, of course, a soundtrack can tell a much more complicated story than just, you should be feeling sad now. Leitmotifs, reprises, thematic echoes, inversions, music can tell a story all on its own, but the language of music isn't one many people speak, so the layers and nuances of a soundtrack can be lost on an audience that hasn't been guided on how to listen for the complexities. Shout out to Sideways for teaching me what a dies irae is. So for the most part, when it comes to a dialogue-centric storytelling medium like a movie or a TV show, the music it features will typically be in the background, wordless instrumentation underlying the character's actual spoken dialogue. The story will be told by the characters and only underscored by the music. Today, I want to talk a little bit about what happens when the music gets to be in charge. A musical number is a moment in the story where a song takes center stage. Whether it's being performed by the characters, played in the background, or non-diegetically overlaid in the edit, the musical number is a slice of the story where the dialogue cuts out for the most part, and is instead replaced with a song that interplays in some way with whatever visuals are going on screen. Now again, my only real training in music is in performing it. I don't have the music theory vocabulary I would need to explain how the music do what it do and why the music work like it does, but I do think I can talk about the various ways that a musical number can be used in a story and how it can work to very efficiently communicate some crucial emotional information to the audience. So let's give that a shot and see where we land. To start off, we need to break down a few different kinds of musical number. Of course, the first and most obvious is found in the actual musical. These songs are performed by the characters, not by the story around the characters, and while the instrumentation is almost always implied to kick in from magical fourth wall bypassing sources, the vocals will be proudly belted by the leads. Smarter video essayists than I, who watch more than one Broadway performance a year, have talked about how some of these musical numbers are diegetic, aka being performed canonically within the confines of the story, while some of them are non-diegetic, sort of metaphorical representations of what might be going on in the character's head. And in lots of musicals, it's not entirely clear which is happening, because it seems like everyone can hear the music, but nobody's commenting on the unusualness of a full ensemble choreographed musical number. Now, to be clear, this is not a problem that needs to be solved by cunningly having one of the characters marvel in bemusement at the sudden musical ensemble to confirm that yes, it is in fact literally happening. It's just a thing in most musicals that, within the conceit of the story, music happens. That's what you signed up for. These songs usually communicate something important that the character is thinking or feeling, and they might undergo something of a character journey from the start of the song to the end, which might line up with the fact that basically every musical number will start comparatively chill and escalate in intensity as it goes. Pretty much everyone on Earth has seen Wicked now, so take Dancing Through Life, which starts off communicating the simple sentiment of let's goof off because it's fun and school is lame, and ends with a full bombastic chorus about how goofing off is in fact vital because everyone dies sighs and the pain of existence is too much to bear without a little goofy goobering. The common turn of phrase in musical theater is that when you can't speak, you sing, so the music is a way to communicate a more strong, clear, passionate version of what could theoretically be communicated by dialogue, but it just wouldn't have the same punch. These musical numbers are completely integrated into the plot and world of the story they're in. Whether or not they're explicitly diegetically happening, they are 100% narratively happening, and the characters are undergoing real development as they sing through their feelings. One step removed from the actual musical is the background track, which is also the first place we're likely to encounter needle drops, which is the term for when a story cuts in an existing song from real life, like they're a DJ dropping the needle on a record. It's technically possible for a needle drop to overlap with the actual musical in the specific context of a jukebox musical, which repurposes existing songs to tell a new story through the characters singing them, but that's kind of a weird edge case, and we're not going to be talking about it right now. Anyway, the background track is music that the characters are canonically listening to, and while they might sing or hum along to the music, it's more of a narrative overlay than it is something they're actively participating in. The background track is unlikely to affect the choreography anywhere near as much as the actual musical, which will usually see every available background character in some way joining in on the singing and dancing, but it can have an effect on the editing. It's very common for the cuts between shots to start showing up precisely on beat because it feels better to watch that way. Background tracks lend themselves to a different kind of characterization than the actual musical. An actual musical number is a highly personalized fire hose of characterization as the character sings, dances, and performs their heart out explaining how they're feeling, why they're feeling that way, and how we should be feeling about it. A background track does tell you something about the character, but it's a step removed from the core of their characterization, and instead it provides context. When Star-Lord introduces himself in Guardians of the Galaxy by hitting play on Awesome Mix Volume 1 and blasting Come and Get Your Love in an ancient alien ruin, that tells us that this guy, despite being a space outlaw with a cool coat and badass helmet, is also a giant dork. And there's extra information to be found here. That is abundantly Earth technology and Earth music. So despite being in space, this guy's got ties to Earth, and is more specifically very clearly the kid we just saw in the opening listening to that same Walkman. I assume that's a Walkman, I might not be correct about that, sorry for being born in the 90s. And he's putting his whole ass into this dance number, so he's either very shameless, or he's super not anticipating this to be in any way dangerous for him. The scene also contrasts with the opener, which was bleak, what with the mom dying of cancer and the immediately subsequent alien abduction. That dude has grown up to do silly little dances and wear rocket boots, so he's probably fine, guys. No therapy needed for this man. Zero traumas Pete over here. He's fine, guys. He's fine. He's fine. These background track needle drops don't need to be character-centric in order to work. Sometimes they can reflect on the plot and what exactly is happening. For instance, the best scene in the Star Trek reboot trilogy is, of course, the bit in Star Trek Beyond where the good guys destroy an entire fleet of alien warships by blasting the Beastie Boys' Sabotage. This one is a shoo-in. We're seeing our crew of protagonists working like a well-oiled machine in true classic Star Trek fashion, and they've technobabbled up a way to defeat the enemy ship Swarm with very high-frequency radio waves, and wouldn't you know it, they have a rocking musical number on file that constitutes just that, with a kicking beat, the literal refrain of Sabotage, and that one bit where they just scream war. The song doesn't impart new information to the audience, instead reinforcing it. We are sabotaging the enemy fleet, we have in fact shut them down with a push of a button because we are at war, but that's where the raw emotional impact of the pump-up jam comes through. This is a huge, triumphant, very human moment after a movie filled with defeats. It's grungy, it's rebellious, it's punk. It works! It's pretty cool how people continued to make movies after this, even though they'd clearly peaked as an art form. They could have done this scene without the music and communicated the same net information, but it would have been worse. Plus, we wouldn't have had the whole crew subtly jamming out while flying for their lives, which is just another part of why this is so peak. The third category is what I call the AMV break. For those of you who weren't in the trenches back in the 2000s, AMV stands for anime music video, and it's a whole genre of fan video made by cutting anime footage over a song or soundtrack to line up to the music. It's a noble art form that's struggled since the great copyright crackdowns began, but in this context, I'm using it to refer to an AMV-style music video cut into a larger story. This music isn't being sung or listened to by the characters. It's being imposed on the story from the outside. It's essentially filling the same role as the normal soundtrack, musical accompaniment meant to communicate an emotional message in tandem with the events on screen, but the song is taking center stage and there's generally little to no dialogue that goes over it. You may recognize this method because it shows up constantly in Arcane, wane, more so in Season 2. The visuals will get kind of stylized, the footage will usually go at least a little bit slow-mo, and some banger will start absolutely blasting over the time-skip montage, fight scene, or time-skip montage of fight scenes that needed the accompaniment. This kind of song break actually has a little more in common with the actual musical than with the background track. This is in spite of the fact that a song used as a background track could also easily be used as an AMV break if it's just not diegetically played, whereas an actual musical number is a different animal altogether. For instance, in the 2004 Daredevil movie, it's not clear if Evanescence's Bring Me to Life is actually blasting on the loudspeakers in either of our protagonists' apartments, or if the movie is just superimposing it onto their respective pre-ass-kicking montages to drive home the energy we're working with here. This could conceivably be either an AMV break or a background track and play exactly the same, plus or minus a single shot of Matt Murdock hitting play on his iPod. But aside from ambiguous cases like that, in general, the AMV break and the musical number both take hold of the story in a way the background track doesn't. While the background track could be removed from the scene it's in without rendering the story completely incomprehensible, if an actual musical number or an AMV break had their music removed, they'd cease to make as much sense. For a musical number, that's because the characters are actively performing the music, but in an AMV break, it's because the choreography, editing, and even the pacing of the plot that's happening on screen can be completely different in and out of the AMV zone. AMV breaks frequently cover montages that can account for days, weeks, or months of in-story time. The visuals can get highly stylized, the characters might appear in dreamlike, impossible environments or engage with the world around them in a much more metaphorical way than a literal one. We might see them flying, drowning, dreaming. Basically anything that could feature in a Bond opening is fair game. Bond openings, also an AMV break, and more movies should have them. While these delineations mostly hold, plenty of movies and TV shows will feature songs that feel like they're crossing the lines between two or more categories. In Into the Spider-Verse, almost all of the hip-hop on the soundtrack early on is explicitly music that Miles is actively listening to. In one scene, his headphones fall off and the background music stops. But the movie uses these songs more like Miles' personal soundtrack. They tell us how he's feeling about whatever's going on, in contrast to the larger-than-life wordless orchestration of the spider people around him. So we're not always hearing them playing diegetically in his headphones, meaning they're not always background tracks. And by the time he gets his big hero moment with What's Up Danger, these songs have stopped being background tracks altogether and become AMV breaks with no canonical in-universe source. There's similar category blending in a newer movie by the same animation team, K-pop Demon Hunters, where all the songs are being canonically performed by the main characters, making them actual musical numbers, but because they're all K-pop stars, the editing and choreography of those musical numbers are extremely AMV break coded in the visuals department, and they look a lot more like a full-blown music video than a typical actual musical when it comes to the editing, lighting, the speed of the cuts. It's drawing on totally different visual language than a musical theater performance usually does, so it feels harder to categorize even though canonically and explicitly the songs are being sung by the protagonists. And of course, while most iconic needle drops qualify as background tracks because they're being canonically played somewhere in the story, some very powerful scenes are scored with AMV break music from nowhere, like the ending of 2001's Metropolis, the catastrophic destruction of a massive citadel inexplicably and beautifully soundtracked with Ray Charles's I Can't Stop Loving You. This needle drop could be a background track, but it isn't. And aside from a few cuts on the beat, the editing doesn't do much to stylize it like a typical AMV break. It's filling the same role as an orchestral background track would be, but because it's soulful and heartbreaking in context, the driving tragedy of the movie being two characters who literally cannot stop loving each other, it adds an extra layer of depth to the storytelling in a way that wordless orchestration wouldn't have necessarily achieved. You can also get actual musical numbers performed by a character, but not so much about that character if the role it's playing in the story is more focused on another part of the plot entirely, like the Shrek 2 version of Holding Out for a Hero performed by the fairy godmother for nefarious purposes, but inadvertently providing an extremely kick-ass backing track to Shrek and co. actually coming to the rescue and filling the role of that hero till the end of the night that she's singing about. That said, I've been praising the concept of needle drops pretty aggressively, but they don't always play this well. Songs are stories of their own, and weaving one into a larger story can be challenging. While it's good if a song reinforces what's happening on screen, it can loop around to feeling ham-fisted if it feels like it's trying way too hard to explain what's going on. And again, I'm flying pretty blind in the music analysis department, so I'm not always sure why something musical worked for me and something else didn't. So to try and figure out what makes an effective music break versus an ineffective one, it might help to do a little compare and contrast with an instance I know I didn't like. When the first Suicide Squad movie came out, a lot of people felt like it was trying very hard to recreate the magic of Guardians of the Galaxy's awesome mix, but with half the subtlety and a tenth of the time. We're zooming into a maximum security prison in Louisiana? Better play House of the Rising Sun. That is also in Louisiana. We just cut to Harley Quinn being quirky and prison? Switch over to You Don't Own Me. That's about being a girl who nobody owns. And then we cut immediately to main villain Amanda Waller, who's about to start offering these inmates some ill-advised devil's bargains, so it's time to start blasting Sympathy for the Devil. No breaks between any of these numbers, by the way. There's no time to breathe. They just set the playlist running in the background and go. It was a very strange design choice, and nobody really liked it, but what exactly was wrong with it? Sure, it wasn't exactly subtle, but neither was Sabotage, so why did this grind so many gears? Well, aside from the general quality of the movie, or lack thereof, that might have been skewing some reads on the matter, there's a few elements that could have been the problem. One that I personally snagged on is that the Suicide Squad needle drops were being used as background sound, and would continue to play quietly underneath the characters talking to each other for the bulk of the scene. This isn't really showcasing the song, because the audience has to tune it out to understand the dialogue. It's not letting the song do its job of telling a story, it's just pointing to it as a reference point and saying, that! We're doing that! Anyway, back to the talking part. In fairness, other movies have done something similar without it feeling too weird, including the movie it was very obviously trying to be, Guardians of the Galaxy, which scored their pre-final battle preparatory montage with Cherry Bomb in a scene that included several dialogue exchanges with the soundtrack playing quietly behind them. But it also let the song take center stage at several points in the scene, and perhaps crucially, it was covering a montage of what could be presumed to be several hours worth of prep and travel, rather than a short single scene of a character introduction that probably could have stood on its own just fine. Montages work great with musical accompaniment to tie them together. A single scene doesn't really need something tying it together like that. Guardians of the Galaxy also has the benefit that 100% of the needle drops in that movie are background tracks playing diegetically, and they're tied to the character of Peter Quill, who clings to the awesome mix because it's all he has to remember Earth and his mother by. When songs from the awesome mix play, we know we're hearing them through Peter, and we can extrapolate how he's feeling through them. They're not just playing because they're thematic with what's happening on screen, they're playing because he wants them to play, and that tells us something about him. He's blasting Cherry Bomb to pump himself up before a mission where he might die. That tells me a lot more about him than a movie non-diegetically playing House of the Rising Sun over a jail in Louisiana. Music is incredibly good at inspiring emotion. Almost too good. It really does feel like magic in some ways. Half the hard part with writing is making sure that the thing you're writing hits the way you want it to. You want the sad moment to be sad, the cool moment to be cool, the scary moment to be terrifying. So if you have access to the entire music library of human history, it makes sense that one way you could reinforce your storytelling is by simply overlaying a song that makes you feel the right kind of way. It adds a richness and a color to the story in a way that simple dialogue doesn't tap into. The hard way to do that is to compose an entirely new score that exactly mirrors the emotional journey you want to guide the viewers through as they watch the story. The arguably easiest way is to find a song that already feels the way you want the scene to feel, and then build the scene around it. This theoretically guarantees that people will watch the scene and feel how the music wants them to feel. But in practice, the way music is used in storytelling is so much more complicated than that. Time in a Bottle is a melancholy, romantic, existential ballad about never having enough time to spend with the ones you love. Playing it over a speedster single-handedly taking out an entire room of bad guys is not part of the original vision, but it slaps, and it adds an extra layer of character immersion to the scene because we're following along with Quicksilver's POV, and this background track is the vibe he's feeling and listening to right now. I guess he probably has novelty tapes where he's taken the songs and sped them up like crazy so that when he goes super fast he hears them normal speed. Don't think about it too hard. And the chill vibe of this song indicates that he's not worried, and he clearly shouldn't be, but when they bring him back for a second super speed needle drop in X-Men Apocalypse, they use Eurythmic's Sweet Dreams Are Made of This instead, which has a faster tempo, a stronger rhythm, and very cyclic repetitive lyrics about how important it is to keep moving even if the world is big and complicated and frequently unpleasant. And this is scoring a scene where Quicksilver, instead of handling an enclosed room of about a dozen goons well within his comfort zone, is outrunning and outmaneuvering a massive explosion trying to save an entire mansion full of innocent people. He's still listening to his jams, even if this soundtrack is much less explicitly diegetic than Time in a Bottle, but this jam indicates that there's more urgency this time around without having to just use a song that feels urgent. I mean, they could have just orchestrated this if they wanted to, and they didn't for a reason, and the reason is that it slaps. I wish I had a more conclusion-y conclusion about this. I haven't magically cracked the code on what makes a musical number good or not, and I wasn't really expecting to. Every piece of storytelling has some context and execution where it works incredibly well, and some version where it works very poorly, and there's never a secret formula for getting it right every time. But I think And I say this as a person with no ear for musical analysis. Some of my favorite musical numbers are the ones that manage to communicate way more than the sum of their parts. Sabotage on its own is a killer song on my driving playlist. This scene on its own is gorgeous to look at, but if you put them together, additional meaning emerges from the synergy. This is a very punk rock way to defeat an alien invasion, but that fact isn't immediately obvious if you're only taking the song or the visuals without putting them together into the full context. A semi-hallucinatory deathmatch between a samurai and an oni could have been scored with anything suitably kick-ass, but Blue Eye Samurai elected to use a Japanese cover of Metallica's For Whom the Bell Tolls, and it added so many extra layers of extreme coolness while being plausibly justified by the fact that our protagonist had been dosed with a hallucinogen in this scene and is tripping absolute balls. So much of storytelling is context, and while a song tells a story on its own, the context around that song can completely change its meaning, and seems like a really cool thing to play with, even if I do not understand how it works. So, yeah. And I know, I gotta go and get back to my pen and ink. Oh, don't make me do it, don't make me go through it. Can somebody get me a drink? And it's hard, it's really, really hard. It's sexy, but it's hard. This bar that I'm raising to be this amazing, it's hard. It's so annoyingly hard, so unavoidably, unenjoyably hard. It's hard to be the bard, baby.